Good morning, and welcome to this online worship service of Neshoba Unitarian Universalist Church in Cordova, Tennessee. I am the Reverend Beth Lefever, pleased and privileged to serve as the minister of this congregation, and I am so very glad that you were able to join with us this morning. Our opening words are by Cecily Taylor from the hymn. Our world is one world. What touches one affects us all. The seas that wash us round about, the clouds that cover us, the rains that fall. In this spirit of unity, let us gather together in worship. And now we ignite the flame of the chalice, symbol of our religious tradition, to help bring light into the darkness. And now please join with me, if you will, in our affirmation of covenant. Love is the doctrine of this church, the quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve human need, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God.
Good morning. Today I'm going to share a story from the Cherokee Nation. Now they would have been from East Tennessee and the Carolinas and West Virginia. In our area we had the Chickasaw Nation. But today I'm going to share this story. We are grateful, Otsaliheliga. Cherokee people say Otsaliheliga to express gratitude. It is a reminder to celebrate our blessings and reflect on struggles daily throughout the year and across the seasons. Uligo husdi, fall, when cool breezes blow and leaves fall, we say Otsaliheliga. As shell shakers dance all night around the fire, and burnt cedar scent drifts upward during the great new moon ceremony. As we clean our houses, wear new clothes, enjoy a feast, and forget old quarrels to welcome the Cherokee New Year. While we collect buckbrush and honeysuckle to weave baskets, to remember our ancestors who suffered hardship and loss on the Trail of Tears. We have hope as our Ilisi, Grandma, cradles the newest members of the family and reveals his Cherokee name. Gola, winter. As bears sleep deep and snow blankets the ground, we say Otsaliheliga. While elders share stories and we savor buttery bean bread and steamy hominy soup, when we feed our animal and bird friends, as older children teach the younger ones how to make corn husk dolls and play cane flutes, while we gather to remember an uncle who has passed on, as men cuddle babies and sing traditional lullabies in Jalagi, Cherokee. Gogeyi, spring. When showers fill streams and shoots spring up, we say Otsaliheliga. While men sing asking for thunder and lightning's protection of the emerging sprouts that women tend. As we gather wild onions, spring's first food and serve them with hen's eggs. As we practice patience to sew pucker toe moccasins and coil clay to build beautiful pots. As we plant ani, strawberries, in ancestral stories, sweet-smelling reminder not to argue with each other. As we embrace a clan relative heading off to serve our country. Gogi, summer. As the crops mature and the sun scorches, we say Otsaliheliga. When we grasp our gigs and wade into the cool creek to catch crawdads for supper, as we sink our teeth into the season's first harvest at the green corn ceremony, while we click-clack sticks, chase a small ball, and fling it high at the stickball game pole. When we recall the ancestors' sacrifices to preserve our way of life, to celebrate Nuli's Tani Dola history, and listen to our tribal leaders speak at Cherokee National Holiday. Every day, every season, Otsaliheliga, we are grateful.
Our offering words are by author and United Methodist minister Steve Goodyear. Money is not the only commodity that is fun to give. We can give time, we can give our expertise, we can give our love, or simply give a smile. What does that cost? The point is, none of us can ever run out of something worthwhile to give. But I give best when I give from that deeper place, when I give simply, freely, and generously, and sometimes for no particular reason. I give best when I give from my heart. Our morning offering will now be shared using the methods shown on your screen. And please know how very grateful we are for your gifts to our church and its mission. My first reading this morning is from Leviticus 24, 13 through 16 and 19 through 22. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Take the blasphemer outside the camp, All those who heard him are to lay their hands on his head, and the entire assembly is to stone him. Say to the Israelites, if anyone curses his God, he will be held responsible. Anyone who blasphemes the name of the Lord must be put to death. The entire assembly must stone him. Whether an alien or native born, when he blasphemes, he must be put to death. And if anyone injures his neighbor, whatever he has done must be done to him. Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. As he has injured the other, so he is to be injured. Whoever kills an animal must make restitution, but whoever kills a man must be put to death. And my second reading is from Matthew 5:38 through 40. You have heard that it was said, eye for an eye and tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if someone wants to sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. If someone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. In my third reading, by comic book and television writer Brian K. Vaughan. When a man carries an instrument of violence, he will always find the justification to use it. If we really want to escape this war, we have to stop bringing it with us. Okay, so I've gone and switched topics on you again this morning, and though sometimes I like to surprise you with a change in topics, this morning, not so much. Tomorrow is Indigenous Peoples Day, and I was going to enjoy preaching on our First Peoples this morning. However, with the horrific shooting events that have occurred in the last several weeks, and which occur almost daily in Memphis, I felt compelled to try to make some kind of sense of it all. Trust me, I would much rather be preaching about Indigenous Peoples Day. Violence has been a way of life for the human species since time began. And from what I have been able to discern, it is unique to the human species. None of the animal species do violence or torture for the sake of violence and torture for their own amusement or ego, or for whatever other reasons humans do violence. Animals may do it for food or territory, or to claim domination in the herd or family, but generally, they only do the amount necessary to their cause. They do not zealously overharm, overkill, or torture. In the book, The Anatomy of Human Destructiveness by German social psychologist Erich Fromm, the author says, quote, "Man differs from the animal by the fact that he is a killer. He is the only primate that kills and tortures members of his own species without any reason, either biological or economic, and who feels satisfaction in doing so." End quote. And he, she, and they devise all sorts of methods to do violence to one another. Because I am apparently a masochist, I spent some time this week studying the book, The A to Z of Punishment and Torture, by international journalist Irene Thompson. I will spare you any details, but suffice it to say, we are ingenious in conjuring up and then committing the most barbarous, savage, sadistic, and horrific ways of hurting, maiming, and killing one another. I only mention this to address the depths of our potential depravity, grateful that many or most of the heinous acts committed upon one another, often by government or religious leaders, are rarely done any longer. Granted, we still have and exercise the death penalty with some enthusiasm in our state as well as 26 other states throughout our country. And 52 other countries impose the death penalty as well, though the number of executions is decreasing, according to Amnesty International. Statistically, however, the U.S. in 2016 ranked 11th in death sentences imposed. In 2019, we ranked 6th in the top 10 countries in number of executions. Also of note is that the Trump administration carried out its 13 federal executions in 5 months, concluding just 5 days before the inauguration of then President-elect Joe Biden. The former president's Justice Department resumed federal executions last year following a 17-year hiatus, and conducted more federal executions than any president in more than 120 years. Now, I am opposed to the death penalty, and I know that some of you are not. That's a typical kind of disagreement that occurs in Unitarian Universalist churches, and which makes so important the saying that we need not think alike to love alike. But exercising a frenetic application of the death penalty for political gain is inexcusable, as is permitless carry legislation, such as was recently signed into law by our governor, and is the law of the land in, I believe, another 20 states. And again, I know you won't all agree with me, and that's okay. In Tennessee, handguns can be openly carried or concealed. Additionally, our laws allow a person to carry any firearm, unloaded or loaded, in a lawfully possessed motor vehicle or boat. Wow, I find that frightening. And it may at least partially explain the high number of interstate shootings we've seen of late. But the relatively new concealed and open carry law that allows anyone 18 and over who has had no recent DUI convictions to pack heat, as they say, without 1 hour of training on the use of that weapon, well, that's not only frightening, that's insanity. How can our young people see that as anything other than a joyful embracing of guns? And how can especially young people whose brains may not yet be fully developed not see in these laws a tacit approval of the use of these guns that they are allowed to carry? As Brian Vaughan said in our opening reading, when a person carries an instrument of violence, they'll always find the justification to use it. Now, I am aware that we had a lot of gun violence before the permitless carry legislation was signed, and before our president our last president, so vigorously killed death row inmates before the new president took office. The reasons for all of that are beyond the scope of this short homily. It is interesting, though, that there is such a massive mixed message regarding revenge and forgiveness in the Bible, the central text for the whole of the Christian religion which this nation proclaims. Leviticus calls for an eye, while Matthew calls us to turn the other cheek. Again, had we more time, I would get into a biblical exposition of these scriptures. But I will say that both the Hebrew and the Christian scriptures, mixed messages and all, are embraced by Christian churches and clergy. But where I'm going with all of this is that both our religious and political leaders, too great an extent, demonstrate a certain tolerance for violence, though mostly our religious leaders struggle against it. Many of our political leaders, though, not so much. So most recently, we have been shocked and saddened by the school shooting of a 13-year-old child by another 13-year-old child, the shooting death of a Rhodes College student in his off-campus home, the mass shooting at Kroger's in Collierville, the shooting of 6 people in 4 separate incidents over the course of 5 hours on a recent Sunday, multiple people shot and 4 killed on a recent Tuesday night, and so on. When and how will the killing stop? Or more accurately, when and how will we stop the killing? Because make no mistake, it is up to us. One way, in my view, is to get rid of the guns or embrace gun control. People with contrary views will quote that tired old saying, "If we outlaw guns, only outlaws will have guns." But it has been successfully done in other countries. The UK, Australia, Japan, and Germany all have made significant inroads in reducing gun homicides, while the United States gun homicide rate is 25 times higher than other high-income countries. It can be done, and we can work toward that effort by studying the steps other countries have taken to curb their gun violence. We also can support groups, agencies, churches, temples, and synagogues, as well as politicians who seek to limit gun violence. There are a lot of them around. We can limit television, music, and social media that keeps gun violence ever at the forefront. Limit this exposure both for our children and for us. And we can remember the good when we are overwhelmed with news of the bad. We can remember that the torture, maiming, and horrendous acts of killing one another in decades and centuries past, which I mentioned early on in this sermon, those are largely over. We have made massive progress in treating one another humanely. We have a way to go, certainly, but we have come a very long way. Acts of kindness are everywhere around us, though they don't get the coverage they should. Acts of generosity are everywhere around us, acts of caring and concern everywhere around us, acts of forgiveness everywhere around us. And beauty still abounds. Take a step outside with nothing on your mind but taking in the sensory beauty of the outside world and the non-human inhabitants of that world too. We must be intentional about remembering the good, working for the good, and embracing the good, thereby keeping hope, faith alive, dynamic, and robust. May it be so, and amen. And now let us move into a time of meditation, reflection, and prayer, and spoken word, and a brief time of silence. The grass still exists, soft and green and inviting. The sky overhead blue, too blue to absorb fully, its beauty sometimes enhanced with clouds, white or sometimes gray. The rain from which we dash and run, just water, sometimes marvelously water that gets us wet. We will dry. The tree which shades us if we crawl under, and which houses for short term or long the bird whose song speaks volumes, if only we will hear. The tree that will tell us its secrets, so many, if only even in our own minds or imaginations we will listen. The tree scarred like us, and yet massive and beautiful as it reaches high into the sky. The squirrels that scamper along the fence or the tree's long bough, giving no forethought, as the poet said, to grief. If we could find a patch of grass and give ourselves over to it fully and completely for a moment or a day, with no thought of the news of the people, but only the news of the scent of grass and tree and wild things. Yes. Yes. Amen. And until next week, blessed, blessed be.